number 2, the final plat shall depict the right-of-way for Oakmont Drive shifted north to ensure it is dedicated solely from property controlled by the applicant. And just to give a little context to that requirement, the drawings in your packets and that have been submitted thus far presumed that the property owner to the south would be amenable to dedicating right-of-way for Oakmont. It turns out after discussions with that property owner, they do not wish to dedicate right-of-way, so Oakmont will need to be shifted north to be fully accommodated by the land owned by the applicant in this proposal. And the applicant is amenable to making that change. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: the application and supplemental materials, staff memo and supporting documents, and the recommendation. With that, I know the applicant is present and I believe would wish to give you a quick presentation as well.
Thank you, Paul and commissioners. Paul's done a great job giving an overview, as usual, of the project, so I just have a couple of little things to add. We'll go through this pretty quickly. We're always available for comments or questions if you have any. This is the major subdivision. One thing I did want to clarify is that there's 114 single-family lots. The 3 difference there are commercial lots that are located adjacent to Westgate down there. So there's a little error in our initial submittal that caused that. So 114 single-family lots. I have the average size about 7,500 square feet. The 3 commercial lots totaling 4.15 acres with an average size of about 60,000 square feet. Then there are 12 tracts of open space within the single-family area that total 8 acres, little more than 8 acres. And then there's 6 tracts for future development that are about 48 acres. They're zoned general commercial and light industrial. The single-family lots, this is just a little detailed view of that. Again, the average lot size is 7,540. The largest lot is 7,998, and the smallest lot size is 6,001 square feet. There's only one lot that is that small. It's not indicative of the project, but it just kind of got squeezed a little bit as we were putting the roundabouts in. The total area for that single-family is about 35 acres. With about 8 acres of open space, it's about 23%. So there's a healthy amount of open space there with the single-family lots. This is a detailed view of the County Road 5 and 32E roundabout, just so you can envision how that's going to lay over the existing conditions there. We are working with the golf course to mitigate the impacts to that hole. And then this is a detail of the Westgate and Oakmont roundabout. You can see that it does push a little bit into the existing Oakmont or Ptarmigan subdivision. We tried to minimize the impacts as much as possible through working with the engineering department and planning department to get that roundabout as small as possible, yet still line up with County Road 5. This is a cross section of County Road 5. I have 2 cross sections, one kind of in the worst case scenario and one kind of in a much better scenario. We are going to be providing a sound wall similar to the one that is on the existing Ptarmigan side. So you can see in this cross section, this is looking north at that red bar there. There's about 105 feet wall to wall there. It does still accommodate bike lanes on both sides, a 10-foot trail on the new development side, and a parkway on the new development side, really trying to minimize the impact that is happening to the existing Ptarmigan subdivision. This is a cross section further to the south. The existing wall moves further to the east there, and so we have a little bit larger space. There is 143 feet approximately wall to wall there. That additional space allows us to plant some trees on the existing Ptarmigan side. We worked back and forth with staff a little bit on the other cross section. There's some concerns that we're working through on the proximity of trees that would be in that parkway on in this area right here, just as a hazard to vehicles that may leave the road. We're kind of just working through the safety issues of that. We feel comfortable that on on the more generous section, we can get some trees. And we're proposing some evergreen trees there in our final development plan that would help mitigate any sound impacts from the lanes getting closer. The lanes from the existing to proposed is moving about 9 feet closer to that wall. So we have shifted the center line to the west of County Road 5 to move it as far, excuse me, as far away from the subdivision as possible. So it's a 9, the furthest east travel lane gets 9 feet closer to that existing subdivision. This is a detail of those 3 commercial lots. They're down close to the intersection of Westgate and 392. Those have been replatted with this to allow that roundabout space to take place there. The original right-of-way that was dedicated there was not significant or sufficient to handle that roundabout. We had a neighborhood meeting. There were some concerns. There was concerns about additional traffic congestion on County Road 5. We're upsizing County Road 5 to a 4-lane arterial and making an intersection improvement. So hopefully that traffic is going to flow much smoother in that area and not have those same backups that are existing there. There's concerns about County Road 5 moving closer to the existing development. We have, as I've mentioned previously, tried to move that as far to the west as possible. We've also worked with staff to eliminate the suicide lane in that 4-lane arterial standard. Since there are no turns, because we have roundabouts on both sides, we were able to shrink that section by 12 feet and thus moving it further away from that existing development. And then there was a lot of concerns about access to the development during construction. So we're working with both the town and the contractor to minimize the amount of closures and keep as much access into that development during construction as possible. The one last concern is the existing cottonwoods that are on County Road 5. Those are in the town right away and do need to be removed to expand the road. We have talked with the town forester. There isn't a requirement to mitigate for those, but we are going to propose putting trees in there. It'll be on HOA property, so we'll work with the HOA to get those, make sure that they're irrigated properly and they can sustain there. We are, again, available if you have any questions or any concerns about the project.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Comments, questions from the commission? I think you just about addressed everything that I'd seen as concerns on the information we got from the HOA neighborhood, so thank you for doing that. If there's no comments or questions, I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the preliminary plat subject to the following conditions as stated by staff.
Second. Been moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Dennison, that we approve the preliminary plat subject to the conditions identified by staff. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes. Those opposed vote no. And motion carries unanimously.
Sir, any public comment?
No, there was no public hearing on that.
Heard before the approval, and I didn't hear call for public comment.
Call for public comment was from item number 3, public invited to be heard. That was right at the beginning of the meeting.
Questions or objections to this proposal?
Well, we did receive your letters from the HOA as far as the objections and things like that.
Sir, this is a public hearing. Why can't the people here be heard on this issue? I'm aware there are reasonable objections.
Well, that would have been at item number 3, and nobody came forward at that time.
Not item number 3, this was item number 6.
Yeah, I know. That's what I said. The public invited to be heard if there was something that you had at that time. But the process is that we don't have a public hearing during this type of.
Hearing being,
Mr. Chair, if I could clarify.
Just a moment.
If I could just clarify, this isn't technically a public hearing tonight. The process calls for a neighborhood meeting, and then the public hearing is technically held at the final plat review, which would be.
I can understand that, but there is a steamroller effect, and if this is being recorded, my name is John Truesdell. I live in the Target subdivision. I object to the procedure here because I think at every step of the way, the public should have an opportunity to be heard.
Scott, the next step of the process would include a public hearing process, would it not?
There will definitely be advertised public hearings before Planning Commission and Town Board at the final plat stage of the process. It would be the chair's purview regarding tonight's proceedings.
Okay. And we do have your letter as far as the issues that you have. And,
That's my letter.
oh, it's your
Yeah,
letter, okay.
that does not speak for me, and I do not think it
Okay.
speaks for the other people here. I think it's important. And I understand, these things all have processes, rules, and structure. But I know many of the people that are here tonight wanted to be heard on this issue, and I do object, and strenuously object to kind of the steamroller effect of the board approving this plat at a preliminary level. I understand there'll be a later public hearing. And that's all I can say. I object, I strenuously object, I don't think it's right or fair.
Well, you will get an opportunity to address any issues at the next meeting at the next step. So there will be a public hearing at that time.
You know what that is?
The-
You know that is.
No, the public hearing will be scheduled after the staff review is complete, of the final submittal. But there is a notify me aspect on the town's website that would allow you to monitor any planning commission or town board agendas for future reference, as well as the public hearing notice will be on the town board, or the town's website, as well as advertised with a sign posted on the property and in the newspaper. So,
Yes, sir.
It's like many of us thought on this public comment section that we could define item as we read this, and that's why all of us were waiting for item number seven.
Okay.
And
Yeah, and I can understand the confusion
I
on
guess
that.
we don't understand it. But isn't the next step, doesn't this, by approval tonight, doesn't this go to the town board now?
no, the preliminary plat is approved by the planning commission, and only the final plat goes to the town board.
So when's the next hearing for public comment?
That's what I was referring to with the lady's question about the final plat. After it's been determined that it's ready to schedule for planning commission and town board, that's when the public hearing is determined and advertised at that time.
Scott, how do they identify by going into the website? Is it by specific item or?
It's called Notify Me, and you can sign up for planning commission agendas, town board agendas, and other various items that are posted on the website.
Is this on the county, on the town website?
On the town website, yes.
Yeah, so that would give you the opportunity, if you're notified of all the planning commission and town board agendas, you can look through the agenda, see if it's on the agenda for that time frame. So, and then when it is, you'll be able to let everybody else know. So hopefully that would be workable. And like Scott was saying, the preliminary subdivision does not go to the town board for approval. And so it's basically, we have approved that, and then the next step is for the staff to work with the applicant. And prior to the final recommendation, then you would be notified of that step, and you could come in at that time and give us your opinions and things like that. So,
Yeah, if I could just, one last clarification is, the neighborhood meeting is scheduled early in the process, and hopefully you all had an opportunity to provide comments at the neighborhood meeting, and then those comments were included in the planning commission packets, and they'll be included in the town board packets eventually when it's scheduled for final approval as well. So there's the neighborhood meeting is the early comment timeframe, and then the public hearing, the formal public hearing is toward the end of the process.
Can you tell me where the neighborhood meeting was?
It was held at the fire station, up the hill there.
And is that posted on the town website? Is that how we were supposed to find out about that?
Property owners within 300 feet were
300 feet.
received a
So that would
mailing.
be the horses that live there. Okay, thank
Yeah, the HOA would have received notice as well.
So I guess the HOA would be, would have to be responsible for letting
Mr.
everybody
Chair,
know. Just a
Mr.
minute, excuse me.
Mr. Chair, if we're gonna have this dialogue, we really probably need to either reopen public invited to be heard, or, we're not getting any of this on the
Yeah, we're not getting
record
anything on the
because
record.
nobody's speaking into a microphone, so.
If you have, excuse me, sir, if you have any more comments, why don't you come up to the podium, give us your name and address for the record, that way we can have everything recorded.
My name is John Truesdell. I live at 7426 Tamarisk Drive, approximately 400 feet from the proposed circle, traffic circle at Oakmont and County Road 5. And the proposed design submitted by the applicant will cause an incursion into the existing Oakmont exit and ingress into Ptarmigan by 60 or 70 feet, and will bring paving, part of the road improvement, as close as 10 feet to the entry walls at Ptarmigan. And obviously, there are a lot of solutions, no turning circle, or no traffic circle, moving the traffic circle west, which can be done 20 or 30 feet, which would cause a deviation off the Anderson property to the southwest, or at their northeast corner, but the Anderson property is to the southwest, which would then preserve pretty much the existing Ptarmigan west face. And I have to say, I listened carefully to the applicant, and there was not proper emphasis on how close this road is going to be to existing Ptarmigan. Now, if the city, through its annexation, has been able to achieve the Larimer County right-of-way some, 15 or 16 years ago, perhaps it's their legal right. But I would urge, in the consideration of this, this is going to cause a substantial and pernicious diminution in the value of the west side of Ptarmigan. And I do not think that the presentation here fully disclosed the adverse effect on Ptarmigan. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. And just for note, if the applicant could take that in consideration as we move forward. Okay, where are we? Item number 8, right? Okay, we will now close our regular meeting, open up another public hearing for rezoning petition Valley Center subdivision. David?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, why don't we take about a 5-minute recess here, just to clear everybody out. Can't hear anybody anyway.
exactly. It's a problem.
The next item, item number 8, public hearing. So we'll close our regular meeting, open up public hearing for rezoning petition Valley Center subdivision.
And Paul, Mr. Chair, if I may. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, for the record, I'd like to disclose I am a sitting member of the town board. I'm here in my capacity as non-voting liaison to the Planning Commission. Although be present during this public hearing, I will not be giving my opinion or participating in the discussion. I will not let tonight's proceeding influence or affect my review of this matter when it comes before the town board. I will make my decision at that time based solely on the evidence presented during the town board public hearing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, David. Paul, you have the floor.
This rezoning request has been reviewed in accordance with Article 5, Chapter 16 of the Municipal Code. The site is located north of Eastman Park Drive and to the east of State Highway 257. Current site zoning is general commercial. There is limited industrial property to the north of the site. The site is approximately 3.9 acres. The request is to rezone from general commercial to limited industrial. The purpose of this rezoning is to allow for construction of 3 buildings that would contain office warehouse uses that would require the industrial zoning for some of the intended users and the operations of those buildings. The subject properties are currently vacant. They did previously house buildings that were destroyed in the tornado in 2008. The properties to the north, again, are limited industrial. There is general commercial to the east and west of the property. There was a 2017 request by the applicant to rezone the property, which was considered by town board and was not approved due to concerns with compatibility to surrounding businesses. The applicant has since worked to redesign the project layout for the buildings proposed for the site. And has taken into consideration the concerns of those neighbors, and we haven't received any follow-up concerns with this public hearing and this rezoning request. The conceptual site plan does orient the garage doors interior to the site, and previously, last year, the proposal had the garage doors on the opposite side, which was a concern. Again, this is conceptual and is not part of the rezoning itself. A site plan would later be required to be submitted and reviewed in accordance with the municipal code. The project is consistent with the comprehensive plan, particularly Chapter 5B growth framework. A neighborhood meeting was held with a summary enclosed in your packet materials. Actually, I believe there were 0 attendees, so there is no summary in this case. The notification was sent out in accordance with the municipal code. Staff recommends Planning Commission forward to Town Board a recommendation of approval of the rezoning petition. Staff requests the following be entered into the record: the application and supplemental materials, staff memo and supporting documents, all testimony received during public hearing, as well as the recommendation. I do want to note the applicants are present if you have any questions for them. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Paul. Since this is the public hearing portion of the process, is there anyone in the audience who has any comments or questions pertaining to this agenda item? Starting on the clock, quick.
Chris Ruff, 311 Habitat Bay. I'm, along with Todd Brudiger, the cause of this whole problem. So, Paul hit the nail on the head. Previously, the orientation of the building was the concern. All the overhead doors back to our business. I'm the owner of 9293 Eastman Park Drive, which is Mark's Funeral and Cremation. Todd's the owner of the building that has the office building, the medical use there. Reorienting this site so that the overhead doors around the interior is perfectly fine. We're never opposed to the rezoning. We're just opposed to the configuration, and it morphed into this. So we're fully in support of the rezoning. I think it'll be a nice addition to the neighborhood. It'll clean up that, where the, what was that, carousel used to sit, and the other two-story building that sat there. So it'll be a nice addition. I think it will look well, or look attractive, and we're fully in support of the rezone.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Anyone else have any comments or questions?
Move to close. Move to
We're on the
close public
right
hearing.
now. Any questions, we can do it until the next agenda item. Second? It's been moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Dennison, that will close the public hearing. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes, those opposed vote no. And motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the next agenda item, which is a recommendation to town board for the rezoning petition, Valley Center subdivision. Anything further, Paul?
No, sir.
Okay, questions, comments from the commission?
So if I remember correctly from the prior submission, there was a access easement for the property to the north that was part of the configuration issue. Is that addressed in the conceptual?
I'd ask the applicant to address that.
I'm Mike Mauer, Olson Associates, a civil engineer on the project, and yes, we're maintaining the same exact easement through the site to the properties in the north. It didn't affect it at all.
Sorry, could you say your name and address again?
Mike Mauer, 7812 West Greeley, 80634.
Any further questions, Sid? Any other comments, questions from the commission?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward to the town board a recommendation of approval.
Second. It's been moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Dennison, that we forward to the town board a recommendation of approval. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes, those opposed vote no. And motion carries unanimously. Next agenda item, we will close a regular meeting, open up another public hearing for code amendment to section 17830, administrative site plan review.
I'm going to gamble that since this is a public hearing on the legislative matter as opposed to
I don't think we have to
quasi-
have one there.
I'm sorry?
I'm good with that. Yeah. Okay, Melissa, you have the
Yes,
floor.
this public hearing for town municipal code amendment to section 17830 and 17920 for site plan reviews. They are in regard to the administrative site plan and the qualified commercial and industrial site plan presentations. So both of these, the qualified commercial and industrial site plans and the administrative site plans, in the case that there's some criteria that it's required to be, current process is to present them to Planning Commission and Town Board like you saw tonight earlier in the agenda. These are uses by right, but we do take them to the Town Board for consideration. No actions are made unless there's some limited occasions where there's some conflict or something needs to be resolved between the applicant and the staff. The proposal tonight is to replace this formal presentation to Planning Commission and Town Board with a different process. Still would convey communications of what's going to happen and what the information is and all the same general information that you get with the presentation, but that would come instead to through the packet and then through the communication section of the agenda instead of being a formal presentation with the applicants here. Some of the reasons why we're proposing this amendment are to save the applicants time and money, having to be at the both meetings, and then also to free up the agendas to allow for more discussion on topics that are actually action items. We also plan to have the information be set earlier in the process instead of right now. We wait until the site plan is pretty much not going to change, and they've gone through most of the issues. We could get it a little earlier to the planning commission and town board to get feedback earlier. So that's one of the goals we're trying to do with this. And also the preparation of the memos, the presentations, the slides leaves more room for staff to focus on a little more the heartier public meetings and our public hearing, larger projects. And then also we see this as a way to streamline the review process for everyone. So in section 17.920, that's the qualified commercial industrial site plan right now. The proposal is to remove the site plan presentation and put in to provide the information as communication items. And then for the administrative site plan, just to modify that section accordingly as well. So here's just the text of the 17.920. There's also a section 6 that we found that while we were doing this was repetitive, so we proposed to remove that as well. We'd replace those two sections with a new section 5, which explains that it would be in the meeting packets and then as information communication items. Here's the 17.830. That's the administrative site plan. The reason we put this in is there is a clause that says those might be presented in a staff presentation if there's certain criteria, and we changed the criteria, and it's the new language is actually just this underlined, that instead of the site plan presentation, it would be packet information. So the process would be including, again, the communications section of the packet. Then we would have planning commission and town board members convey any comments to the planning department at those regular meetings under that section on the agenda. And then in response to any comments that we get, we would, when we work with the applicant to make any changes or however it's addressed, we would provide that in a future packet. And those packet items will include what you normally see, a brief overview of the project, the site plan, the landscape plan, the building elevations. While we were doing this, we came across another language that we wanted to change in the same one, so we threw it on here as well. This is where, there are occasions where we might still have to bring it back or do a formal presentation. We changed irreconcilable differences rise to dispute arises, and then we also wanted to add how we were going to convey to the applicant that they were going to have to do a different, or come to a meeting to talk to the planning commission, and that's through a notice either by mail or email or both. So staff is recommending that the planning commission recommend to the town board approval of these amendments to these sections up here as presented, and we'd include any planning commission criteria or comments that you want to see as well. So I forgot to add the slide, since this is a public hearing, that these items be added into the record. The materials, the presentation, public hearing, and the recommendation. I think I said that already though. So apologize for that. And that's the end of the presentation.
Okay, since that's the public hearing portion of the process, is there anyone have any comments pertaining to this agenda item? Everybody's looking at you.
You could just say anything.
I'll take that as a no.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second.
And moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Bushelman, that would close the public hearing. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes, those opposed vote no. And motion carries unanimously. Moving on to the next item, which is the amendments to section, where am I at here now? I'm on the turn to page. Recommendation to town board for ordinance amending sections 17.830 and 17.820 of the Windsor Municipal Code. Comments, questions from the commission?
I have one quick question. The dispute resolution process, the old language is in the code now, so if the planning department and applicant reach an impasse on the site plan, they could.
They do that now.
They could request a more formal hearing.
And pretty much it's the same process. We just changed irreconcilable differences to dispute arises.
I've never seen it happen.
Oh, okay. Yeah, we try our best not to.
Okay.
Any other questions?
No. Mr. Chair, I move that we forward to the town board a recommendation of approval of the enclosed ordinance requiring the site plan presentation to be replaced with an informal communication item in respect to meeting packets as outlined by staff.
Second.
And moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Foreman, that we forward to the town board a recommendation of approval of the enclosed ordinance that we just spoke about and the noted changes. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes, those opposed vote no. And motion carries unanimously. And moving on to the next item, which is a public hearing. So close the regular meeting, open up the public hearing for amendment to section 161030 of the Windsor Municipal Code regarding proposed off-street parking requirements for multi-family residential. Paul?
So a number of you were present for the joint work session with Town Board earlier in June this year, where we discussed, among other things, the multifamily parking requirement. With the influx of multifamily development we've seen recently, it's come to our attention the current requirement of 1.5 parking spaces per unit may be inadequate. Of particular concern is when there is no on-street parking in vicinity to accommodate overflow parking. Some of the issues that can arise when there's not enough parking on a site is people parking in fire lanes, landscaped areas, bike lanes, no parking areas, with increasing calls to police department or code enforcement. So at that work session, Town Board did express concern that the ratio is insufficient, and that an approach using a number of parking space based on the number of bedrooms does appear to be preferable. And that is what the majority of surrounding jurisdictions use as well. There is no uniformly accepted ratio for parking for any use, really, but multifamily especially, everyone has different travel patterns, different use of transit, things of that nature, just different mix of people living there. So there's no magic bullet. We could require 4 spaces per unit and there'd never be a parking shortage. We don't want to go too far the other direction and cause undue burden on the applicants. And there's also other negative impacts of large unused parking lots, just things like heat island effect, just negative visual impact of just large parking lots, larger stormwater runoff that has to be dealt with. So we try to strike a balance for a slight increase especially when there's no on-street parking available. So what's proposed is in front of you, or on the PowerPoint. It does include a credit for when there is on-street parking, and that's a similar approach to what's actually in the code now for downtown, for any use when there's on-street parking. Given the challenges of developing an infill site downtown, that's kind of an incentive. We used a similar credit for the multifamily, again, to try and mitigate the increase when there is a on-street parking available. We looked at a couple of case studies for 2 of the most recent multifamily projects approved in Windsor to see how this would have affected their parking requirements. First one is Pelican Bluffs, which is up on Crossroads there. And the requirement under the current code was 294 parking spaces. The proposal would have increased that to 325, so an increase of, it comes out to an increase of around 10%. And in this case, they actually provided 335, so it wouldn't have affected them at all. The other project, Fossil Ridge, which is the larger one that's going on where Steeplechase will be extended to the west of Highland Meadows Parkway. That one would have also resulted in approximately 10% increase in the required parking. They were required to provide 611. The proposed amendment would have required 675 spots. So a fair increase. What they actually provided or will be providing is 620. And both of those did not have any on-street parking available to them. I did measure Steeplechase, where Project B Fossil Ridge is located or will be located, had that street, if it had on-street parking, they would have met the proposed code with that 10% reduction. So we think it's a pretty fair approach that should hopefully avoid any parking shortages without really impacting most projects all that much. Staff recommends Planning Commission forward to Town Board a recommendation of approval of the proposed amendment to Municipal Code Section 16-10-30 to modify the multifamily parking requirement as outlined. That's all I have, if there's any questions.
Okay, this is the public hearing portion of the process. Anyone out there have any comments or questions?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second. Moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Bushelman, that would close the public hearing. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes, those opposed vote no.
Mr. Talon?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm zoning.
Motion carries unanimously. We will reconvene our regular meeting, moving on to the next agenda item, which is a recommendation to the town board for the ordinance we just discussed. Comments, questions from the commission?
Mr. Chairman,
Jerry?
what is the rate, do you give 100% credit for on-street parking places?
It's for every 25 feet of frontage, you can credit that up to 10% of the required parking.
Well, you like mentioned downtown, a lot of those parking spaces are for other use.
Right, so in this case, the fact that there's parking available, we want to give them a credit. I think it's impossible to get into who's going to be parking where. When there's on-street parking, we can't control who's using it.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering about the 100% credit. Should it be a 75% credit or something like that? Be more reasonable.
Right. That,
Well, it's up to a 10% total credit, correct?
up to 10% of the required parking can be.
Well, I'm saying, if there's 100, if there's 10 on-street parking, they get credit for 7.
Right.
It's still 100% typical for other places, and feel pretty confident it'll work.
You're asking if the 10% credit's typical of other
No,
jurisdictions?
no, not the 10%, the 100%.
100%. I've honestly not seen other communities with this type of credit used.
That's the only comment I would have. We're giving them too much credit by giving them 100% of the parking spaces in front of them.
I guess we'll find out as we go along, as far as any.
Watch it.
But I think it's a step in the right direction as
I
far
agree
as.
with that.
Yeah, I do too.
Any other comments, questions?
No. Mr. Chair, I move that we forward to the town board a recommendation of approval of the proposed amendments to the municipal code 16-1030 to modify the multi-family parking requirements as outlined by staff.
Second. Been moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Dennison, that we forward the town board a recommendation of approval of the proposed amendments to the municipal code section 16-1030 to modify multifamily parking requirements as outlined by staff. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes, those opposed vote no. Motion carries unanimously. Good job, Victor. Okay, we will close our regular meeting, open up another public hearing for amendment to section 16.6-90 regarding proposal to minor variance process. Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Commissioners, this item before you would amend what is currently an administrative modification process. The purpose for this request, as some of you are also at the work session, the town Board of Adjustment Appeals was faced with some variance requests that really didn't meet the intent of the code, especially when it came to demonstrating a physical hardship. Some of these variance requests occurred because of human error or something that occurred that was unintended, but it did not meet the physical hardship part of the variance. And some of these requests also were for a very small deviation to the code, such as this one here, one example, a 6-inch offset error due to someone moving a stake out in the field. So those are items that could otherwise be processed administratively and wouldn't have to go before the Board of Adjustment. Currently, Section 16690 is an administrative modification. It's not used that often, and it also would not address what is proposed in the minor variance procedures and criteria. And this would provide administrative variance process for, again, minor deviations to plans. Here's another example. This is an infill project where the existing house had 22 feet to the lot line and they wanted to add a porch. It was consistent with other homes in the neighborhood. However, that 2-foot encroachment did have to be processed through the Board of Adjustment. In an infill neighborhood, as you can see here, where it already has non-conforming setbacks throughout the neighborhood, as long as something was consistent and met the criteria that we're proposing, that could be approved administratively. So here are the circumstances where a minor variance could occur with setbacks, structure height, distance between structures, so long as it still meets the building code, lot area, lot coverage, and to correct a legally established condition. That would be, this is an example here, this 6-foot, 6-inch setback in the front, just because it's an older neighborhood. We did look at surrounding communities to see if they had a similar process as we're proposing, and all of them do in some shape or form. This would not be, you would not be able to use the minor variance for purposes such as density or intensity, changing permitted uses or mix of uses. You would not be able to decrease the amount of open space or landscaping. And you would not qualify to go through this process if it conflicted with another requirement. Also, we would not be able to submit if the minor variance would create a need for subsequent requests. And then also, it could not result in a lot line adjustment or lead to a minor subdivision. So the criteria that we've proposed, a reduction in 10% or 1 foot, whichever is less, for setbacks and offsets. Also an increase in 10% or 1 foot for building height. The same for between structures, so long as the request meets the International Building Code. And a 2% reduction in the minimum lot size. And if the variance is necessary to correct a legally established condition. And that mainly pertains to the older neighborhoods and infill projects. This is the language that's in the proposed code. This is also in your packet. Some of this language was included in the existing code, which is the minor modification, and then we changed the language as shown here. Appeals would still go before the Board of Adjustment, or if there's neighborhood opposition that cannot be addressed within a 10-day resolution period. And notification to neighboring property owners within 300 feet of that request would be notified and have the opportunity to object. And this process will help streamline the review process. Minor modifications or minor adjustments to plans would no longer be on the Board of Adjustment Appeals agenda. And it would save the Board of Adjustment staff and the applicant time, eliminates the need for a public hearing, advertising, posting, preparation of memos, presentations, and meeting attendance. It also helps with variance requests that do not technically meet the intent or criteria of the current variance process. I'm just going back. And again, this would also address those unintended deviations. So staff is recommending modifying section 16690 to replace the minor modification procedure with minor variance procedure with criteria. And staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward to the Town Board a recommendation of approval of the modifications to 16690, replacing administrative modification procedure with an administrative minor variance procedure. Subject to any comments that the commission may have and any town board comments.
Okay, again, since it's the public hearing portion of the process, if anyone in the audience have any comments or questions?
Move to close the public hearing.
Second. And moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Dennison, that would close the public hearing. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes, those opposed vote no. And motion carries unanimously. We will reconvene our regular meeting, moving to the next agenda item, which is a recommendation to the town board for the ordinance amending section 16690 of the Windsor Municipal Code. Anything further, Carla, that you have to add?
Nothing further?
Comments, questions, Cindy?
Quick question, so if I'm reading that right, with the 10% or 1 foot, whichever is less, that max would be a foot, so that example of the setback with the 2 foot encroachment, that's an example that would still have to go to the BOA because it's over a foot?
Right, I noticed that as well. The 2 foot example wouldn't qualify.
Right, yeah, that is true. That was a bad example. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, so the maximum allowance would be a foot. Sounds like.
Yeah, and actually we're, with the code update, we're looking at some infill standards, so something like that could potentially be processed administratively so long as it was consistent with other homes on the block.
Chairman, it says notice proposed, notice of various requests to adjacent neighboring property over to 300 feet. Is that currently the standard also for notice?
For an actual variance it is, but for a minor modification, there is no public notice.
Okay, so.
There's only paper notice for variance you can send.
Okay, I stand corrected.
On the page here where it says notice, parentheses proposed, that is for if it doesn't qualify for it, or?
For a minor variance,
Right.
the notice would occur, whether it was supported or not. That is something that would occur. to give an adjacent property owner the opportunity to review the variance and object.
And there was what, a 10-day period or something like that?
Right.
Mhm.
Respond.
Right.
But all the
So-
way out to 300 feet, that'd be quite a, okay, it's not gonna put more burden on you, that's what I'm looking at. It's-
Right.
You
The-
already have to do that.
The intent was to notify someone that maybe shared a property line or was directly affected.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions?
Mr. Chair, I like this because we're mainstreaming, we're cutting down on work for the staff because we got plenty of work going already. Anytime we can get this simplified, I think that works better for us, you know. And with that, I'd forward a motion to the town board, a recommendation to approve the proposed code amendment.
Second.
And moved by Commissioner Talon, second by Commissioner Busherman, that we forward to the town board a recommendation of approval for the proposed code amendment. Those in favor of the motion will vote yes, those opposed vote no. And motion carries unanimously. Communications from Planning Commission. Cindy, you have any? Just glad to be here. Ms. Foreman? Jerry?
I'm just curious, maybe you're gonna brief us on it, but where do we stand on the code updates?
I was actually gonna mention that
Okay.
under my communications, but I can
Okay.
do that
We'll
now.
just wait, we'll
Okay.
wait there. Then I'll skip over this. Victor?
No communications?
Kelly? Doug? Sir. Town board liaison, David?
Nothing, sir, thank you.
Okay. Communication from staff, Carlin?
Nothing tonight. Thanks.
Paul? No. Melissa?
Okay,
Scott?
Yeah, so the code update, we came to the conclusion that the planning consultant that was working on the project was not going to get us to where we had hoped to get with the streamlined, business-friendly, user-friendly code. So we did send them a termination letter and have terminated the contract for several reasons that they weren't holding their end of the
Non-performance,
contract.
basically.
Right. So I was going to mention, since we do have several former BOA members in the room, the definition of hardship is something that we'll also be looking at. You know, this minor amendment, minor variance that Carlin just went over is really to address those instances where we have that minor modification section of the code right now that is so narrowly written, it doesn't really give us the flexibility to recognize if a property pin, if someone measured off the wrong property pin and the house encroaches 6 inches, we really can't use it for new construction right now, but this amendment will allow that. But it only goes so far. We'll also be looking at the definition of hardship to make sure that that's more, I guess, BOA friendly for one thing, so that the hardship is something that's not so rigid a standard. So I know that's something that we've heard from some of you former BOA members. So that is part of the bigger code update. You'll be seeing there'll be a joint work session that hasn't been determined the date yet, but a joint work session of Planning Commission and Town Board to review the landscape standards will be the first item because it's the furthest along in the review process. I believe that'll be followed by the sign code section. And then once we get into the zoning and subdivision regulations, those all interrelate so much that it's a bigger bite of the code. So I think that's probably going to be the next step after these first couple to get those out of the way.
So since we terminated contract with the current contractor, what's the plan going forward then?
We are working on them in-house. So
Okay.
we did have a good start with the consultant that I really don't have a percentage, but we're over half the way there, I think, on many of the sections of the code. And that's why we're taking the ones that are the closest and getting those ready for Planning Commission and Town Board review and try to bite off chunks of it putting together a draft schedule. We've given that to the town manager, and we're hoping to get these first couple of sections done yet this year, and then early next year, get those bigger sections tackled, so. That's and, you know, quite frankly, I'm afraid that the private sector is every bit as busy as the public sector is, and trying to get another consultant on board this far into the process really wouldn't serve us well, and it would probably be an added expense that just wouldn't be worth it, so.
Well, you're just wasting about 3 or 4 hours a night just sleeping anyway, so you can do this instead.
Right, so.
That'd be my concern, if that has time to
Yeah,
do
no,
it.
well, one thing, I want to thank the town board for, approving a reclassification of the 2 planning technician positions. So Devin, who had an item on tonight's agenda, as well as Carrie, both of whom are fully qualified planners, are being reclassified from planning technicians to planner 1. And so that will give us additional staff that we're already using them for reviewing some of these applications, and they are doing a great job, so.
So now you can officially use them for these.
Yeah,
types.
exactly. We kind of expanded their job description, and now we're catching up to that, but, and we're also looking into contract services for other things that we'll probably be proposing in the budget coming forward this fall. In particular, some specific expertise that we're lacking, like transportation engineering, that kind of thing, is something that we'll be looking at contracting out, and also, or we'll be asking the town board to consider. And then also any of the other tasks that, under the land use review process, that a consultant may be able to augment our existing staff. So we're looking at those options, and we'll be bringing something forward to the town board shortly.
Okay, sounds good.
Other than that, the only other communication, unless there's any questions regarding that.
I didn't see any heads
Okay.
bobbing that way,
So the only other
keep
thing,
going.
I just wanted to update that from those of you that have told us that you're planning to go to the APA conference, we do have rooms reserved, and we've gotten the registration in by the early bird deadline, so we'll be looking forward to seeing several of you at the conference in October. So
Okay.
that's all I have for communications.
Okay. Did you have a question? Or you just making noises next to me? Okay. Man, did you have anything?
Move to adjourn.
We are going. I don't wait for seconds for that. It's like